gives me so much pleasure to talk about our innovation and startup ecosystem amid the pandemic and the crisis that we now face. One important realization is now more than ever, we need to adopt new technologies, pursue digital transformation, and focus on innovation, sustainability, and resilience. New technologies have played a crucial role in keeping societies functional in times of quarantines or lockdowns. The same technologies would be needed as we restart the economy, as we build resilience and prepare for the new normal. I would be presenting the Philippine innovation and startup ecosystem and our focus towards becoming innovators, growing and supporting more innovative startups and companies to drive digital transformation in the country as we pursue a more sustainable and inclusive development. Well, as you can see on the slide, the Global Innovation Index 2020 ranked the Philippines 50th out of 131 countries, up from number 54 in 2019. This is the first time that the Philippines has breached the top 50 of the Global Innovation Index, which recognizes the country as an innovation achiever for the second year in a row. Note that the Philippines is number 3 in terms of high-tech net exports and number 8 in ICT services exports. We were in the process of implementing our new industrial policy known as Inclusive Innovation Industrial Strategy when COVID-19 hit us. This new strategy focuses on innovation and aims to grow globally competitive and innovative industries by embracing Industry 4.0 technologies, closing the gaps in our domestic supply chain, and deepening our participation in global value chains. The strategy also focuses on linking together our innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem through strong collaboration between government, academe, and industry. The other pillars, as you can see on the slide, are reskilling and upskilling our workforce, equipping them with digital skills and making them Industry 4.0 ready, development of innovative MSMEs and startups, and very important is ease of doing business. The next slide shows us the government's Industry 4.0 framework. We view the adoption of new technologies as a way to strengthen innovation through the creation of new products and services in the market, resulting in more quality jobs, higher incomes, emergence of new industries, as well as the promotion or introduction of environmental goods. Through smart manufacturing, production efficiency goes up, competitiveness improves, leading to more efficient energy use as well as material use, industrial competitiveness, and linkages to supporting industries. The use of these new technologies is a crucial step to upgrade our industries toward a more inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Using these new technologies, for instance, voice recognition, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, robotics, 5G connectivity, and Internet of Things, our strategy prioritizes the creation of new products or solutions in the following areas: smart buildings and smart home technology, digital health, e-gaming, smart assistants, vehicle technology, resilient technology, audio, video, and education technology. At this point, I would like to share with you the highlights of a technology utilization survey that we carried out last year to help us understand the Industry 4.0 readiness of our industries. On the overall, as you can see on the slide, the bulk of the company respondents are still at very low to low level of technology utilization, as they are still using spreadsheet management and standalone database management system with legacy applications. And as expected, micro, small, and medium enterprises have the lowest level of tech utilization. With our innovation focus, we are building regional inclusive innovation centers, or RICs, that would serve as platforms to link together our innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. Through the RICs, we are connecting the different stakeholders, such as universities and funders, R&D and science and technology parks, accelerators and incubators, MSMEs, startups, government, and other players in order for us to promote a more innovative culture, as well as to accelerate the commercialization of R&D investments. We started piloting RICs 2 years ago in Cebu, Davao, Legazpi, and CDO. And this year, we are adding 4 more RICs in Zamboanga, Batangas, Tuguegarao, Cagayan, and Central Luzon. We have lined up the following Industry 4.0 readiness initiatives. We are working with the UNIDO in crafting Industry 4.0 roadmaps. We are also conducting a feasibility study for the establishment of an Industry 4.0 pilot factory and an Industry 4.0 SME Academy to provide Industry 4.0 trainings, especially to MSMEs. Together with other government agencies, we are also formulating a human resource development roadmap to prepare the workforce for Industry 4.0. In this slide, I'm sharing with you our approach to our Industry 4.0 transformation. This is our roadmap, which serves as our guide in terms of our digital transformation journey. As you can see in here, step 1, we are still also continuously doing this information, education, and communication to reach out to as many stakeholders as possible and introduce Industry 4.0 tools and its applications to industries, especially in terms of improving their competitiveness and productivity. And then number 2, you can see that we are also formulating Industry 4.0 roadmaps, as well as partnering with tech companies like Siemens and Tuvsud. And recently, we've also partnered with the WEF, especially in conducting firm readiness assessments through the SIRI framework. This is the Smart Industry Readiness Index. And 3 and 4, that would cover, of course, by this time, we're hoping that we would be able to establish already the Industry 4.0 factory. But at the same time, we, of course, would want to make use of this pilot factory as a demonstration or as well as a training ground for our MSMEs. And then the 5th would be implementation of the company roadmaps, which would be the outputs of the SIRI assessment. And at the same time, we are offering to those companies that would be embarking on their Industry 4.0 journeys, incentives such as those arising from the CREATE law. This is going to provide income tax holiday along with reduced corporate income tax. We are also planning to implement a SMART program, providing financing, training, and knowledge support to companies and industries. And then, of course, we're also working together with other government agencies in terms of developing our skills framework that would guide us in formulating training programs as we reskill and upskill our workforce, as well as guide our higher education system, the universities, the academe, in terms of the curricular reforms that are needed to prepare the workforce for Industry 4.0. And more recently, we just launched our national AI strategy for the Philippines. It focuses on how AI can be used to uplift the lives of our people, improve the productivity of enterprises, and enhance the competitiveness of our economy. We are building a national center for AI research that would serve as hub where multinational companies can explore their various AI R&D projects with the government, as well as with researchers and with the academe. In terms of the plan, this slide shows us the more detailed activities that we are pursuing as we implement the AI roadmap. We are creating an AI task force. We are also promoting R&D projects that would foster academe and industry partnerships and collaboration. I've already mentioned the establishment of the NCARE, or the National Center for AI Research. And lastly is programs that would support AI startups and R&D with multinational companies. In the next slide, I'm showing to you a brief introduction to the country's startup ecosystem. Based on the 2020 Global Startup Ecosystem Report by Startup Genome, Manila's ecosystem is considered to be among the top 100 emerging ecosystems in the world, ranking 36th overall and with a value of $1.6 billion US dollars. Total early stage funding of $102 million US dollars in the last 2.5 years. It is also classified in the activation phase, like Busan, Frankfurt, and New Zealand. The Philippines was also top 20 in the Global Ecosystem Bank for BOC and top 30 in the Global Ecosystem Affordable Talent. The Philippine startup ecosystem is young and growing with a lot of talented individuals. There are huge potentials with over 600 startups, more than 35 incubators and accelerators, over 50 angel investors, 120 co-working spaces, and 40 venture capitalists. In terms of funding, 54% of our startups require seed-level funding. By type of industry, most startups are in digital services and fintech, although many are also providing tech solutions in manufacturing, multimedia, logistics, healthcare, and education. Well, this year, as we all know, has been a very challenging one, with the COVID-19 pandemic continuing to disrupt economies and lives. Top concerns of startups are what you can see on the slide. This would range from financial impact of the crisis and the impact of the potential of the global recession, plus funding difficulties and the corresponding decline in demand, and of course, reduced consumer confidence. But despite the crisis, it is amazing to see how our startups are responding to the issues arising from COVID-19 by offering solutions through the creation of new products, services. And as we know, people become more innovative during crisis periods. In fact, in a survey done by Pricewaterhouse, 49% of Philippine startups explored new products and services, and more than 20% of the startups said that they experienced an increasing demand for their services and products. DTI's startup programs aim to provide various support services to startups depending on their funding needs and stage of development. And you can see on the slide the various stages in the life cycle of a startup. And DTI's programs are actually focusing on the commercialization phase, particularly in here, to help more startups cross this valley of death and help them grow. So we are focusing on expanding incubation and acceleration services, mentorship, industry matching, and development support, along with internationalization programs to expose our startups to ecosystems abroad. So these are the programs that we are about to implement. Okay. And using new technologies, startups have been providing support to the government through contact tracing apps, personal and community health monitoring, chatbots, along with social distancing and providing online marketplaces, platforms. Innovative startups have been emerging to provide tech solutions to address issues in health, agriculture, education, finance, multimedia, supply chain, and logistics issues. And the names that you can see on the slide are just samples of these innovative startups that have been very active, especially during the crisis. So according to, based on the survey that we did on the technology utilization of manufacturers, we found that companies are prioritizing investments in software in the next 5 years. 75% of large enterprises will invest in software, while medium and small enterprises will invest 29% and 45% respectively. Likewise, in a survey carried out by Epson, 86% of SMEs in the Philippines view digital technology adoption as a way to thrive in the new normal and overcome the challenges of the pandemic. And so startups offering Industry 4.0 and digital transformation services will support this transition of enterprises into the digital economy. So some of the key learnings that we can draw from the pandemic are listed on the slide. COVID has actually accelerated the use of digital technologies. And as we have seen, digital technologies and innovation have played a crucial role in ensuring quick responses to the crisis, along with business continuity, recovery, and protecting workers. Number two, the race for survival intensifies, more innovation would emerge, and the less innovative firms would fall behind and eventually die. Number three, it's not only the innovative firms that survive, but the more resilient firms thrive during the crisis. And now, resilience to external shocks is seen as a competitive advantage. So as we enter the new normal, three key imperatives that I would like to highlight are the need for agile production and supply systems enabled by advanced technology. The adoption of new ways of working is important to increase resilience and shared responsibility and collaboration between government and the private sector, along with the academe, to address social and environmental challenges. So just to end, reflecting on our experience in the last 6 months, or in the last year, there are 4 points that I would want to share with you. The pandemic has provided an impetus to fast-track the adoption of new technologies such as AI, robotics, and innovation, with greater focus on resilience and sustainability. The crisis also has presented new Industry 4.0 opportunities that we can leverage to discover new, better, and more resilient ways of doing things. Number two, Philippine startups are not only providing solutions to government in addressing COVID issues, but they are also offering digital services to enterprises and industries. Three, innovation would be crucial in achieving sustainable, resilient, and inclusive recovery. Companies which have greater innovation emerged resilient and even recorded gains amid the economic slowdown. And lastly, we also realize the importance of cooperation and collaboration, vital steps as we face the post-crisis future. There are many opportunities for government, startups, industry, and other stakeholders to work together and collaborate in crafting innovation programs and promoting sustainable and inclusive growth.
So I'll talk to you about leading a creative future, and as Jesper mentioned, Aalto University is one of the leading universities, or the leading university as we tend to think in Aalto in Finland. We were formed 10 years ago, bringing together technology, business, and art and design, and we were formed as an innovation university. And now we've been rethinking our strategy for the next 10 years of our existence, and radical creativity became one of the big things, one of the themes in our strategy. And I'm really happy to be telling you a little bit about that and how we think about radical creativity, and especially how to lead creativity, as creativity is the root for innovation. So really, really happy to be here. So as I said, we have a new strategy at Aalto University, and we want to go beyond innovation, looking at how can we be sustainable, how can we be entrepreneurial, and how we can be creative. And especially, of course, the question is that how do we manage creativity? A lot of the business schools around the world, my dean colleague at the Aalto Business School is telling me that they are starting to look towards art-based practices and creativity. But now we have actually at Aalto University a world-leading art and design school next to a world-leading business school, and we've been collaborating on this for quite some time. And the big question that I'm interested in is that how do we manage for creativity? How do we make organizations, businesses, companies that are creative and therefore innovative in the future? But of course, it is all based on the goal that we have, that we want to make the world a better place. So we are really an innovative research university that wants to have an impact. Our mission really is to strengthen, of course, the Finnish innovative capacity, but also have a global impact. And this is what I'm hopefully doing also here in this presentation today. Really, the purpose for our university is shaping a sustainable future. As we all know, we are facing big societal challenges, and we really need to think of how to solve these and how to contribute towards solving these. And many of these challenges are such that no one person, one instance, one university can provide the solutions, but we really need to do things together, and therefore bringing talent from science, art, technology, and business together to tackle these challenges is one of the approaches that we really have. So how do we see creativity at Aalto University, and how do we approach it? Undersecretary Aldaba mentioned several times Industry 4.0, digital era, digital revolution, and we live in amongst a big shift, big changes. We've seen that in the pandemic, but if we look beyond the pandemic, there are big shifts and changes happening in the societies globally, and we need to find ways of dealing with that and tackling with the challenges. And sometimes when you are living within a shifting era and changes in the society, it's a little bit difficult to see how things might be developing and wrapping our heads around of where we are and what kind of changes there might be. So I'll take you back about 150 years, maybe even a little bit more, to the period of time when the first industrial revolution was happening. And in a way where we might be in our headspace, in our thinking, in our adapting to the new way of doing things, is like this gentleman here. Assuming he's somewhere in England, in the English countryside, maybe he's been a farmer for generations, his way of life has been inherited from his parents, and now he's recognizing that things are changing and there are big shifts happening. He might be thinking, how do I cope with these changes? How do they impact my family? How do they impact my children? where do we go and what kind of society will we have? And of course, the shift that happened at that point was a major shift from the lifestyle that the countryside had witnessed to the industrial era and the industrial society. And now, with the benefit of the hindsight, we can actually see that there was a big turmoil in societies. Many of the ideas and concepts that we use, things the ways we think about management, for example, was created during the Industrial Revolution time. And so we know with the hindsight that there was a big period of turbulence that then created a lot of the benefits and good things for us that we are now enjoying. But of course, the shift itself was challenging to the people who were living through it. And maybe we are facing that same kind of shift, moving towards Industry 4.0, digitalization, these different revolutions that we are witnessing. And just like our thinking has changed from the agricultural era to industrial era, we also need to rethink some of the concepts and adapt to the realities that we are facing in the future. A second approach to learning from the past is that during the same period of time linked to the first industrial revolution, we saw a big shift in transportation. And if you ask a person who is here driving the coach and ask what would you like to have, maybe the answer would be more horses, better horses. So how do we really make the leap, the creative leap and innovative leap from one mode of thinking to the second? And here we can see what happened when the combustion engine was invented. And noteworthy in this picture, when you compare it with the previous one and look at the carriage, the first automobiles actually look a lot like the horse carriages that we had. And this is very typical for our thinking and our creativity, our adaptability. How do you move really your thinking from just adding the combustion engine to a horse carriage to really rethinking that how can we really make the best use of the new technologies that we have come across, and how can we really benefit from that? And if we think the development that we have now witnessed from this one of the first automobiles to the electric vehicles that we are now facing, how different they look, how different they operate. The challenge for all of us at this point is that now that we are getting the digital tools, artificial intelligence, robotization, how do we really benefit and see creatively the potential and the possibilities that we are now offered? So basically, I think one of the key competitive elements that we all need to master and really think about is that how do we make the transition from the first applications of new technologies to really reaping the benefits and the potential of those new technologies in the future. And this is where creativity comes in, and the ability to really think in a new way and look at things differently and make these rapid leaps towards new kinds of thinking. And when we talk about creativity, we don't talk about, I come from the School of Arts, Design and Architecture, and I often get the question that, okay, you represent the artists, the creative people, but how about the rest of us? And our approach at Aalto University, and I think it should be the global approach as well, is that creativity is not monolithic. It's not reserved to the R&D people, the artists, etc. But we all have the capability for creativity, and really enhancing that capability and developing that capability is the key driving force and competitive edge for a lot of companies and organizations moving towards the future. So we really think that there are different kinds of creativity: scientific creativity, artistic creativity, design creativity, but we all have the potential for being creative and taking things forward in a creative way. When we talk about radical creativity, we really talk about big shifts, the paradigm changes that we need when we are tackling the grand societal challenges. Incremental creativity, in a way, is the kind of approach where we constantly improve and adapt ideas and make them a little bit better. But then when we really want to have impact, we really need to look at the radical or divergent creativity, the ideas that substantially differ from the organization's existing practices or the existing paradigms. For example, I'm talking about paradigm shift in leadership. The leadership and management that we have developed was really developed during the Industrial Revolution. And now when we are moving into digital society, the fourth Industrial Revolution, we also need to rethink the paradigm of leadership, for example. There are also different levels of creativity. The individual level creativity, the psychological creativity is the creativity that we have as individuals. We get new ideas, we are creative in ways that are new to us as individuals, but it may well be that the same idea has been had elsewhere and other people have had it before you. But for an individual, that is creativity as well. But the radical creativity comes in historical creativity. The ideas that are really entirely new to humanity and therefore has the potential to really make a big impact and influence the way in which we see the world and how we are looking at our challenges. And of course, the ultimate goal for us is to really look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And all of these, or at least most of these, are really the kind of challenges where we need to challenge the current assumptions, the current paradigms, and look at things differently and often systemically. I'll return to that in a moment, but we really don't have easy solutions that we could apply, but these are really systemic changes and require collective creative learning in order to solve these challenges. And of course, the recent year and a half, but years before that also have demonstrated to us that change is really inevitable. We are going through big changes, ecological, technological, social, and economic, that are really bigger than we've seen in many other times in human history. And therefore, the scale and complexity of this global shift and global change has really challenged us. And maybe the pandemic is one of the examples that we are seeing, the kind of global shared challenges where we really need to work and act together, also to find the creative solutions, as we have during the last 16 months or so. Also, the challenge that we have is that how do we tolerate this uncertainty in this new VUCA world, where things are really volatile, they are uncertain, complex, often chaotic, and ambiguous. And many of the leadership and management ways of thinking require that the top leadership really creates a plan, knows what we are doing. But how do we do this in this new kind of environment, the VUCA world? So even leading, as we have all seen the past months, We really need to be able to tolerate the uncertainty and trust for the people to find solutions and develop together to move towards tackling with the challenges that we are facing. And therefore, what we think at Aalto University is that the creativity really is a valuable mindset, and it is the culture of radical creativity that allows and supports creative questioning and not knowing. And for a leader, this is always a challenge to come forward and say that I don't know the answers, let's find out together. And so we celebrate learning from exploration, experimentation, and failure. And if we look at the top 10 skills for 2025 workforce by World Economic Forum, you can see that many of the things that we are discussing today, analytical thinking and innovation, active learning, complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, and leadership and social influence, etc., are on top of that list. So even here we can see the shift, the paradigm shift that I'm discussing. But of course, the question is then, how do we lead for creativity and how we manage for creativity? If I'm making the claim that we need to rethink our leadership, we need to rethink our management in this new kind of environment that we operate. So how do we do that? And this is where I think it gets interesting, and this is where we see the leadership paradigm shift happening. We've been in a world where many and previously many things, the challenges that we have faced have been what we call technical challenges. The kind of challenges where we know what the problem is, we understand it, we know that there is a solution, and the person who solves it is the authority or expert. We go to the leader, we go to the expert asking, okay, this is the problem, how do I solve that? And the resources we need for that is time and financial. If I give you a very practical example, if you have a flat tire in your car, you know what the problem is, you know how it's solved. There is someone, if you can't change the tire yourself, you know someone who can do that, and it just takes time and a little bit of money to get that changed. A very simple technical challenge. And the world used to be more simple before we really became very complex, where many of the challenges that we were facing were technical. But now we've moved into a world where a lot of the challenges, and especially the global challenges, are adaptive challenges. So the problem itself is unclear and requires learning. We really need to gather people together to discuss what really is the problem here. The solution also is unclear and requires learning. So as we identify the challenge, we also need the people to start discussing, okay, how do we solve this? And the people who solve it are the people with the problem. So co-creating, thinking together, learning together, and the resources that we really need is learning new ways of working. And these kinds of adaptive challenges are the majority of the big challenges that we are facing. And here we need the creativity, but we also need the new kind of leadership, how to tackle with these kinds of challenges. And my take to this is threefold. The first step is to enable common vision. I'll talk about these in a moment in more detail. The second I call defining the creative sandbox. And the third one, leading in a new way by trusting people, empowering and delegating authority, and then leading by influencing. So let's have a look at these one by one a little bit. One of my favorite quotes is from Linda Hill from Harvard Business School, where she says that direction-setting leadership can work well when the solution to a problem is known and straightforward. But if the problem calls for a truly original response, no one can decide in advance what that response should be. By definition, then, leading innovation cannot be about creating and selling a vision to people and then somehow inspiring them to execute it. The new way of doing things and creating a vision is together with the people. Looking at the adaptive challenges, what is the challenge? How can we learn together? So as a leader, you no longer create the vision and then help people execute it, but you really create the vision together with the people, so enabling the common vision. And of course, this is linked to the new way of working where we can't just think that there's one best way and we make the plan and then we execute it, but we live in a world where more and more things are through iteration. So we need to have the culture and the ability to fail quickly and learn from those failures. And that leads us to a successful outcome. The second point, the creative sandbox. Creativity always needs an element of freedom, but on the other hand, as leaders of organizations, we need to exercise some form of control as well. So we need to define the limits of that freedom. And coming from the Nordic countries where all the children experience playing in sandbox, I've called it a creative sandbox, where you can play freely in the sandbox, but you cannot throw sand out. We all know these rules when our kids were playing in sandboxes. And don't hit anyone with a spade. But as a leader, this gives you the possibility of limiting the freedom, but then giving the freedom within the agreed boundaries, within the creative sandbox. And then supporting the creative process. This is a bit of a joke that is circulating on the internet, but I think we can all relate to this when we are writing a paper or delivering a speech or whatever happens. We have these different stages of the creative process. And the role of the leader is to really support the people who are going through this process. And looking at it from another perspective, the creative challenges that we give to people and the people we build the sandbox and we give the challenge to the people. The starting point often is that this is really awesome. This is a great challenge. But gradually we face the challenges, and then comes the time when you really feel that you are not able to cope with that. This is too difficult, that I'm really a failure. And the role of the leader is really to support in that, for the work in the sandbox, not to lead it directly, but to support it in many ways. Then the next point was about empowering and delegating authority. When we really have a new way of looking at things and come up with an innovation, like the person here in the cartoon has come across with a goose that lays eggs of solid gold. We then really need to have the empowered authority for that person to take that forward, rather than facing the organizational challenges of someone saying that that's not our mission, and facing budgetary controls. And my favorite in this drawing is that the project manager coming in and saying that, well, we need the feathers and liver for another project, so let's kill the goose. So we really need to give the power of decision making and a lot of authority to the people doing the creative work, doing the innovations, so that they can really pursue these geese that lay golden eggs. Then lead in a new way. Once you have built the creative sandbox and you have the people in there and you have empowered them, you lead in a new way by influencing. And this is where I really like the thinking of Ronald Heifetz and Martin Linsky from Harvard Kennedy School, where they link the formal authority and informal authority to providing direction, protection, and order to people. But the new kind of leadership is really not dependent on authority. Anyone in the team can be raising questions. Anyone can bring forward to the adaptive challenges. Anyone can participate in solving those. So it really becomes much more of a shared leadership the leadership that is not dependent on authority, and facilitating that. You as the top leader manager really need to facilitate that kind of culture where people can take the leadership even if they are not in the positions of authority. So the paradox is that, and this is from Teresa Mabile, also working at Harvard, you cannot manage creativity, but you can manage for creativity. So how do we facilitate creativity and innovation in our organizations in a situation where we can't directly manage it? And some of the capabilities that Linda Hill is outlining in the drawing that is included here is creative abrasion. So we really need to have the kind of culture where new ideas and very open, very heated debate even and discourse can take place. But then we need to have a culture that enables creative resolution. So instead of either or, we create both and kind of solution where we integrate different kinds of viewpoints and ideas and then test them quickly. The creative agility. How do we test quickly the new ideas that we've come across and then continue the circle again? So these are some of the competencies that really mark the creative, innovative organizations. Sometimes it's easier to look at how not to lead creativity. When talking about leading creativity and innovation, it becomes relatively soft and a little bit philosophical and not really a toolbox that we can use. So sometimes it's easier to look at the negatives, how not to lead creativity. So if you really want to kill creativity in your organization, this is a great checklist. So micromanaging, really looking at the people, what are they doing, how are they doing, really hand guiding them kills creativity, because we all want to be autonomous. We want to have the inner passion to our work. So when we are micromanaging our people, we are killing those, and that is really a great way of killing creativity. Coming from the industrial era, a lot of our organizations are about bureaucracy and reporting, the authority structures, different kinds of reporting. When you have creative individuals and when you want to build a creative culture, minimize the bureaucracy, minimize the reporting. We always need to have some, but really think, what do we really need? What is absolutely necessary? The third point, measure presence, not results. I think here we have made great progress in the last year or so. Now that we all have been remotely working, it really has developed, hopefully, the leadership's ability to look at delivering the results rather than just measuring the presence. And I think this is a great learning opportunity for all of us from the pandemic time. The fourth way of killing creativity is using positional power and commanding. We have all been in a situation where we are enthusiastic about something, we want to do something in the way that we as experts see fit, and then the leader comes and says, no, you will do it my way because I am the leader. And the reaction is that, okay, I'll do it your way, but I'm not so passionate, I'm not so enthusiastic, and I may be slower. So try to facilitate rather than using positional power and commanding. Of course, punishing for mistakes kills creativity. If we live in the environment where iteration is the way forward, if you punish for mistakes, that will kill the courage to test new ideas, and of course creates an organizational culture of fear. So for the closing, I have from an article by Linda Hill some takeaways for you that you can use hopefully as sort of checklists for your organization and for yourself. That do you really have a culture that facilitates creativity, facilitates innovation? Do we really feel part of a community? Do we have a shared purpose? Do we have rules on engagement that support collaboration and learning? Do we have the culture that helps generate ideas through discourse and debate? Can we test things quickly? And can we make these integrative decisions rather than compromises? So, looking at your organization and your organization culture, these are good questions for you to think whether you are creative or innovative. But for you as leaders, I think this is even more important. Questions about your own leadership mindset. Do you think that your primary job as the leader is to create a context in which your team can innovate? Are you comfortable serving as the stage setter, the person who is creating the possibilities of creative work and innovation, rather than being the visionary who is leading from the front towards their vision? And do you have the courage and patience to really amplify differences, the different viewpoints, different opinions in defining the new ways of adaptive work and looking at the adaptive challenges? And this requires courage for you to think differently and courage for you to act differently as a leader. And I think this is the leadership paradigm shift that I'm talking about when talking about radical creativity and how to lead for radical creativity.
So why is design thinking so key to winning today and tomorrow? Well, number one, you can say that what you're selling, no matter what industry you're in, is actually experience. You're not really selling the thing you're selling. You're selling the way it feels to use it. So if you're a bank, it's how it feels to bank with you. If you're an insurance company, it's how it feels to be insured by you. If you're selling tractors, it's how it feels to buy, use, and maybe maintain your tractor. So no matter what industry you're in, if you're selling food and so on. So no matter what industry you're in, you're about creating experiences. You're curating a bit like a director of a movie or a theater. You're creating an experience. You're putting people and props on the stage. You need to think about who's your audience and how can you delight them. What would it take for people to sleep outside your store or to be in queue online to get serviced by you like they would do when there's a new something being launched by Apple, right? So when we think about this question, everybody will have an expectation of how a problem gets solved. I need my toilet fixed, it's broken. I need my car fixed, it's broken. I need a new home, whatever it might be. And if you don't understand that expectation, you will not be able to service it. And often as customers, we experience that gap between what we wanted and what we got. Or at best, we only got what we expected, but we weren't thrilled, we weren't delighted. So understanding this kind of negative experience by your customers can be a powerful starting point for innovation in terms of what is it that they expect that they're not getting, but also what would delight them that they don't even really know they could get from you, that you have the ability to deliver. If we think of it as back to what was shared previously, right? The world, our customers, our companies, our colleagues are all facing so many what we call wicked problems, complex problems, that it's hard to say where the problem begins and where it ends. It's hard to say what the solution should do. We're still kind of trying to make sense of the problem that we're facing. And there are so many stakeholders inside our company and outside our company that affects this: competition, government, education, talent, regulators, and so on, right? So it's highly complex to actually come up with a new way of creating value in the market. Our customers are often asked to go through all kinds of hoops to get the value that they're actually looking for. This often destroys the flow and experience that they're getting. Our internal structures, KPIs, sometimes politics can also get in the way. Maybe everyone is thinking that they're winning and they're getting their bonuses and hitting the KPIs, but the customers are actually not satisfied or delighted. So how do we actually lead ourselves through this, right? So maybe to take a quick kind of a sense of where are you guys with this, if I can ask everyone to take out your smartphones and scan the QR code with your camera, or you can also open your browser and go to menti.com and pop in the code 447880. That's menti.com, and then popping in the code 447880, but probably easier to scan the QR code. Then my colleague Rudy is going to share the results in a second. So I'm really curious to understand a bit more about your situation in your organizations and maybe what questions you're sitting with, so we can spend our time together most effectively now. So Rudy's going to take over the screen in a second. I may need to stop sharing, so I will do that now. If you haven't scanned it yet, it will also show on the screen that he's sharing in a second. And here we go. And can maybe make it full screen, Rudy. Thank you for that. So really curious to kind of understand from you. You can scan here if you haven't already. What's the situation in your organizations right now and what's important to you? And we're seeing the first folks coming in here, so that's great. And it's also in the chat in case you want the link. And I think we can go to the next page already. If you didn't get the QR code by now, you were too slow, you need to get it in the chat. Or you can see the URL at the top of the screen. So the first question is, innovation and customer experience is key for us to win for your company. Do you strongly disagree, somewhat agree, or strongly agree? Second question is, it's hard for our customers to differentiate us from our competitors. Do you really think your customers think you're that special? So how special are you? Is incremental and slow in our organization. So how fast and how agile are we actually at discovering the need for change? What is the problem? What is the solution? And rolling out and scaling that solution in your organization. 5 being super fast, 1 being super slow and incremental. And the fourth question is, it's critical to change mindset and skills in our employees. And I can see we have about 14 responses so far. I think there's still a few folks still answering. Please don't be shy. We will not tell who you are, where you're from. Great. So I think what we can see so far in the pattern is that innovation and customer experience is very important to win. That's probably why you're joining here. The question is, does everyone see that? Back to the previous points, right? Is this a board concern? Is this a C-suite concern? Or maybe it is. But then has it cascaded down into how we're organized? If your customers, I would say this is kind of a meh score, as we call it. It's not an awesome score to say that we're less than 3 on a 5 scale in terms of differentiation. So why is it that we're so similar to our competitors? Why is it that we're not different, unique, special, worth talking about? And what would it take for us to get a 4 or 5 score, right? Even a 1 point improvement on this score would probably be of high value. If you feel you're 2.8, maybe your customers will give you 1.8, who knows? Maybe try to find out, go and talk to them. Third point here is innovation and change is incremental and slow. So that's kind of an average score. So it seems like folks overall agree, but it could definitely be worse. Maybe one wonder I have is compared to what? Because maybe for many folks who have been in the same industries for a long time, there's a certain expectation of how long does it take to discover change in the market and roll out a new solution. Typically, marketing is much faster at adopting to these changes, and product is both costlier and more risky to play with and to change. And what we're seeing is the large tech firms and startups are setting a new benchmark for what it means to be fast to market, to run experiments. And the last is that most of you agree that there's a critical aspect of this, which is changing how we think, changing how we work, and what we're able to do to kind of integrate these kind of design, innovation, customer centricity type of skills in organizations. So thanks for sharing this. We had one more question. Let's go to that. So the last question here is, having heard the previous presentation on radical creativity and thinking about where you are now, could you share one question that you're sitting with? So what is something that would be of value for you to kind of discover? Perhaps it could be a learning question. I can't promise I can answer all of it, but at least for yourself, you know what you're looking for, and you can also continue to explore for the next presentations and for the day tomorrow. So if you could share one question you're sitting with, something that would be of value to you personally or to your company, or who knows, to your customers. So let's get a few questions in here. Hopefully you didn't drop out of the application already. If you did, you can just hit the link and forward to this question. You can also write it in the chat if you struggle to do that. So how do we operationalize what we learned? Yeah, maybe, I don't know who asked that. You can also put your name if you want. What's the hard part about operationalizing it? What would you need to know in order to make this happen? What is it that you're sitting with that feels a bit like, that's a tall order to lift? Let's see if we can get a few more questions in. You can also put it in the chat if that's easier for you. How do we ensure that we get the right persons on board with the right mindset? Yeah. So who is it that needs to be involved? And how do we get them to care about this? And how do we get them to work with a new mindset, perhaps? I'm hearing as a question, and I'll be addressing this a bit in the presentation, definitely. Let's see if we can get a few more questions in, just to make it a bit more relevant for you guys. Maybe there's a reason you signed up for this. Something you're seeing in the company, something that you're trying to do, something that you're struggling with, something you're dreaming about. So please don't hold back. You can also continue to put them in the chat. I'll probably pop back to the screen here in the interest of time. So let me just get back to the slides here. Here we go. Excellent. So you can say that seeing these questions and seeing how important both the learning question was, how important innovation and customer experience is, that's also the reason why globally leading companies have long been using design thinking, and you can say this kind of second phase of early adopters have discovered the need to bring in more design, more creativity, more art, more innovation in the companies. And this is why design thinking is being adopted globally in every industry you can imagine. Well, first and foremost, it helps companies win through customer centricity. If you only look internally at what is important to your bosses, but you don't really understand what's going on in the market, how you're going to help the company find the future, how you're going to create the right experiences. Back to the mindset piece, you can say that design thinking and designerly ways of working, the skills and the mindset behind it, it creates a shared way of working with these questions. And when we have a shared process for creativity, when we have a shared language for creativity, when we start bringing in customer as the key part of everything we do, it changes everything we do. And last, you can say that it's also about building new skills. And many companies have focused a lot on tech skills, which is very important and great. But I'm also seeing that technology alone, everyone's going to have technology, everyone's going to have data scientists, everyone's going to have people who can code and use AI and blockchain and so on. But it's really about building a way of working with creating customer value that leverages technology. But you will also need collaboration, creativity, experimentation, courage, and so on. So that's where this kind of new ways of working comes in. So you might ask, so how do I sell this to the CFO? She's pretty tough, a stingy lady, especially in 2021, right? Well, actually, design makes money, right? So when there's a powerful piece of research by the Design Management Institute, and they've been looking at this question consistently. And what they saw was basically that companies that leverage design, not just graphic design or digital design, but leverages design as a way of leading, as a way of doing strategy, as a way of hosting your employees in the organization, they actually have 219% better ROI for investors over the average S&P 500, which are already great global companies, right? So design-led companies basically have better returns. The next is IBM looked at this question around speed. So design and designerly ways of working actually helps you go faster to market, discover the problem that you didn't know customers were having faster, and solve for that problem, test that problem, iterate that problem quicker, which obviously means time savings, but actually more importantly means sooner to new revenue, sooner to maybe higher margins, because there's higher margins on solving novel problems than solving red ocean problems. And last is kind of the efficiency part of it. So it's also that you can actually take away a lot of the things that you are doing, because when you discover what customers really care about, maybe 60-80% of what you're doing maybe isn't needed anymore, or maybe that when you're doing something new and highly relevant to customers, you can say the first version of Facebook or the early iterations of Google are not what they are now, but they didn't need to be, because they were so novel that customers appreciated this new value so much, and there was no competitor. right? So there's also an element of creating efficiency in the organization. So you can say, in essence, this calls for a new type of leadership. We're now all sitting here on long Zoom calls from early morning to late night, and maybe even with different time zones increasingly, right? Having to collaborate on very complex problems only on Zoom calls without the whiteboard and so on. So there's a need for a new type of leadership. This very much comes from the top, and that's why it's important to see many leaders here today. But if you're not changing how you show up, if you're not helping the rest of the C-suite and maybe even the board change how they show up, if you're not hosting your colleagues to think about the new project, the new product, the new tweak to marketing, the cost savings you need to drive. If you don't come at that problem in a new way, you're not likely to get new results, right? And if you don't solve this problem, someone else will. Whether it's your big competitors or it may be a new startup doing it, or some of the big tech firms who are increasingly bleeding into healthcare, education, many other industries. Someone else is going to solve this problem, so that we have no choice in a sense. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness as the one that created it. So this change is not about adding design into your organization on top of everything that's there and sprinkle a bit of post-it notes and then everybody will be happy. It's also about stopping doing things. It's fundamentally changing how your organization works, and that might be tough to do depending on where you're sitting in the hierarchy. So it's of course figuring out what role can I play in this change, but there's no doubt that the organization will need to change and need to change fast. So what is design thinking then really? Well, you can say one definition that I love is the transformation of existing conditions into preferred ones. So let's say back to the days before Grab and Uber and all these ride-hailing apps, it was very difficult to travel and get a taxi. It was difficult to order one, it was difficult to pay them, it was difficult to tell people when you would arrive and so on. There were many problems associated with it. So it wasn't just making it easier to book a car, a taxi, it was also many other associated pain points on that customer journey with the need to go from A to B. So it's the transformation of what it means to travel into what it could mean to travel. So what is the equivalent question for your industry? Whether you're in education, whether you're in infrastructure, energy, healthcare, doesn't really matter. So in essence, you can say design thinking operationalizes what we just heard about, right? It's about bringing a different type of process to collaboration. It's about using slightly different tools than ones we normally use, not just spreadsheets and PowerPoints. It's about bringing in different questions, different techniques, different ways of facilitating and hosting people who's going through change processes. And it's in essence a silly, naive mindset, you can say, and I'll share a bit more on what this mindset means. And when we do that, then we will get creative problem solving, then we will drive innovation, and we will do that by really leveraging what users, customers, employees, partners care about, and understanding that at a deeper level in a different way than the assumptions we had behind the past product that everyone has now. So you can say, in essence, design thinking is a human-centered approach that focuses on users' needs, pains, and gains. And all customers are not the same, even when you think of it as all the high net worth individuals who buy this product, or for the low-income population, we have this. Maybe even inside those, there might actually be significant differences in what they're looking for. So you can say that in essence, any innovation needs to answer these 4 questions. We're typically quite focused on what can make money. We are often quite focused on and getting better at what technology is available, what's feasible, what can be done that would actually work so we can make the money. Then marketing, could you please paint it pink and make it look cool so that customers would actually want to buy it once we put it out in the market. And now the kind of new added challenge and increasing focus is also on, so even if we created something people would want that could make money, that could be done, there's a risk that we will be burning the planet or creating inequality or other unintended negative impacts. So we actually need to answer all of these 4 questions when we build anything new or when we improve anything that we already have. So no wonder that it's not easy to do. This is why design in a way is a very necessary way to work with these tools, because these challenges, because it's not easy. So what is it users want to achieve? What are they trying to get out of buying from you? And how do they want to feel as they go through that experience, right? Those could be two important questions to take back to your product innovation. I think I'll skip a little bit on this case example, just in the interest of time, and get a bit more into how you can leverage design thinking for innovation and customer experience. And maybe we can see during the questions, if you want to hear an example, I'm happy to share. So back to who actually owns this, because if we don't have accountability or driving this from the top, then it's very hard to make it happen from the bottom, right? Doesn't mean you can't change things in your team or how you work, and that can still create some value. But for the company to win through design and innovation, it needs to be a conscious strategy. So I was very pleased to hear the ideas around working with board. We're seeing the same question, right? Often boards consist of people who are looking for quick wins, who mainly look at the financials, and maybe not as much from an entrepreneurial standpoint, unless it's a SME or startup or growth company. Often the leadership team also have a very focused KPI-driven way of thinking about this, and often customer experience and innovation is not part of those KPIs. So why should anyone in the C-suite actually care about innovation except the poor guy or poor girl who's been named Chief Innovation Officer or Chief Digital Officer or Chief Transformation Officer, right? So I think we need to actually understand that innovation can sit at all the C's, it just means something slightly different. And we need board and CEO sponsorship to make this happen. The mindsets that I mentioned before, some examples of mindset here would be empathy, optimism, embracing ambiguity, making it real, trying to test it, learning from failure, iterating, not being afraid to get it wrong, and to have the confidence to try to do new things. So this is what we're asking both our leaders, but also our teams to embody. This is not easy to do. This is going to take time because most industries don't have these mindsets currently. So that's where we can lend a bit from the designerly or the creative way of working. To give a feel for what that could look like, let's say you have a design challenge to launch a new product, improve a certain experience, reduce cost on something, whatever it might be, increase sales. Start with talking with 5 customers or 5 users, understand their needs and try to see if there are any groupings in their answers that are similar challenges that they're facing. Then try to crystallize those challenges into a question. How might we help our customers to whatever they want to do so that they can whatever they want to achieve? Right? Try to zoom in on those, try to come up with many creative ideas how you could solve that. Maybe invite customers in, invite students in. It's easy to connect with the university across the planet on Zoom. Then kind of converge and say, what could that look like? Could we make it real? Could we, even without building it, test a mock-up of it, a prototype, a sketch? Could we create an experience, a video, something we could show customers, 5 to 7 customers again, in the right customer profile, test it with them, tweak it until we have found a solution that customers actually want. And then we can begin looking at what would it take to implement this. Then we can look at technology, budgets, and so on. So that's kind of giving you a little bit of a feel for what this kind of journey could look like using design thinking. I think I'll skip a little bit fast through this so we have time for Q&A as well. So what could be some immediate opportunities? Of course, it varies very much from which company you're in, but just to give you some examples that we have worked with our clients around, right? So it could be maybe looking at customer experience. Have you mapped the actual journey of what it feels like? Do you and people in your company understand what it feels like to be a customer right now with your company or with your competitors? Where is it in this journey? What are the touch points, the experiences that you have created, the opening of the box, the calling the call center, using it in the daily? Where is it that they're facing some frustrations and there's some barriers? Have you aligned internally on who owns which part of this journey? How do you measure success and so on? So that could be one example of more optimizing and improving the existing service or product. It could be certain channels that your customers are using right? How easy or difficult is it to buy from you? How does it feel for your salespeople, or maybe the folks who are actually delivering and servicing your customers? What do clients say about how you sell? Are they feeling sold? Are they feeling supported? When you talk to your employees, what gaps and pain points are they facing? If we want them to be service-minded, excited, they want to stay with you, grow with you, how could you actually create a better employee experience so that you deliver a better customer experience? From a partnership standpoint, you can't create all the value in the world and you can't be the best at everything. So how could you actually leverage partnerships better, for example, in insurance, working with banks for banker, or gaming or healthcare and so on, as an example in their industry. And from an innovative product standpoint, what is it that you're not doing that you should be doing? How might sustainability be an opportunity for you, and not just a tax, an expectation by shareholders or customers, but how could it actually be a revenue opportunity to be the most sustainable, whatever it is your industry that you're in, right? So these are just some examples. So design can be applied in any industry and across different functions. So to kind of sum up here, to get to the Q&A, you can say why. We've already covered that a lot. The world is changing. We need new muscle, a new approach to dealing with this change, to make sense of this change, to not just respond to it, but to also help define the future. What we need is a human-centered, collaborative problem solving and creativity to leverage design methods and to drive business impact and stakeholder impact, sustainable impact. And how to do that will be my last comments here is, number one, we need alignment in the C-suite and in the board on what's our customer-centric strategy. Have we been creative enough? Are we just repeating 3% more of what we did last year? Have we really understood what customers care about and where it is that we have massive opportunities to either improve existing value or create new value? Have we established a mandate who owns what in the C-suite? And have we developed a structure to check in on that frequently? Do we have some metrics and so on? Do we have budgets and resources behind these either improvements or innovations? Have we got a clever way of building our own talent to have these skills, to have this mindset? Could we buy some talent or acquire some companies that has this talent? Or could we borrow, could we partner with other firms? For example, when we're being brought in by our clients, they're not building or buying, they're borrowing, right? Can we install designerly ways of working? Could we train, but also coach folks to drive this culture, to have these kind of experimental processes? We call them design sprints. You can do something like what I showed you before in about 5 days. So you can very quickly move from not knowing the problem to having a tested and validated prototype, a test of the value that you want to create. And have we removed obstacles in the teams that's looking to drive this in these kind of what we call skunk works or labs and so on, where we create a space for people to do something different? And do we frequently review how those experiments are going so that we can put resources where value is created and we can kill projects if it doesn't make sense? Or should we continue a little bit longer and come at it in a different way? So those are some of the tough decisions, of course, as leaders. So that would be kind of my summary here.
So overall, what we call Factory of the Future has as I said, the purpose of exploring Industry 4.0 in Grundfos. How can we utilize that? And we focus on doing that to ensure an impact both for our customers, of course, also for our own competitiveness, being more productive and more efficient, but also for our employees. So we create a safer, better workplace to be at for all of us that work for Grundfos. The way that we then work with this is very well summed up in the quote that I have added here in the slide, that it's better to act ourselves into a new way of thinking than thinking ourselves into a new way of acting. So we don't spend a lot of time in meeting rooms designing 5-year roadmaps, or actually, I cannot show you a 5-year roadmap, but we don't have that, and we've never had that within this program, because the world is ever changing and it's changing very fast. So to me, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't mean that we don't know where we want to go and have some guidelines, but I don't have a plan where I can say, then we do this, then we do that, and the third step is this. We do that together with 2 plants that we have selected as what we call pilot factories. They are completely normal factories in the Grundfos setting with the exact same goals and KPIs as every other plant. There's no special treatment for them, but they, on top of their normal role as manufacturing pumps, have the role of supporting us by testing and helping us mature our solutions into something that is globally scalable. First plant was in Denmark, and then later on, a few years after, we chose to add a second plant in Suzhou in China. And the purpose is really to test it in real life. And I think that is super important in doing this, because you can test it in an R&D environment that is more or less like a rubber cell, which is, you can make everything work there. Here, when we go to the shop floor, as one of the first things in the project, you really get a flavor of this will work or if it won't, because the feedback is brutal and honest, and basically if it doesn't work, they don't use it. So that's excellent in terms of ensuring good solutions. Then it might be difficult to see here on the slide, but and also apologize, I can see for the typo, it is Factory of the Future. When we organize what we do that within 5 programs. We have what we call our foundational projects in the center, that is the biggest tile, which are the big projects that I normally, if you look at a car, I call them engine projects, because they ensure that we, for the long run, will really be able to go fast. But right now, it's not that visible what we're actually doing, tuning the engine. So that is for us, manufacturing execution system, traceability, or connecting our equipment on the shop floor. Then we have, that is the gray tile, a special focus on additive manufacturing, which to me is one of the great technologies that has the opportunity of really disrupting the way we do manufacturing and also our supply chains in the future. So that is one technology focus we have, because otherwise the other 3 tiles that you see surrounding the foundational projects, they have a specific focus on an area that we want to improve, on an area we want to go into, supporting with digitalization, and not a technology. Everything we do is based on needs from our production or from our group functions. One focus is customer service, really related to supply chain, how we can improve that to give a better service, better lead time to our customers. Another one is quality for the entire value chain. How can we use digitalization to improve quality? And the third one is effectiveness and well-being supported by digitalization. How can we make ourselves more productive and effective while still ensuring and improving the well-being of all of us that work for Nordic? So these programs set the scope and set the frame of what we are working on and aiming to do, and each of them have a description and a set of KPIs that we should target to try to improve. When we then have developed a solution within one of these areas, together with the pilot plants, then we deploy it to our plants globally, based on a pull model, where they pull whatever is needed. Apart from the foundational projects, they are pushed out, because here it is crucial that we get this out as fast as possible to enable a good foundation. Yeah, I think that was this for this slide. Overall, if we look at what we have been doing for the past 4.5 years that this program has existed, we have worked on approximately 90 different projects in this period of time. We have finalized approximately 40 of those, which are now in various stages of deployment. Some are nearly done and some have just begun. The project number 38 was finalized 2 weeks ago, so that is just starting up now in a deployment. We have deployed and done more than 1,200 implementations globally in these plants. So that also means, if you look and can see the world map, then you cannot see 38 different colors in these circles, because they represent each of the projects. Because our model is not to go from plant to plant and simply just implement everything. The model is the plant pulls what they need based on their current situation. And then we slowly develop the level of digitalization globally. It is also important to mention, I have a team of approximately 40 people supporting many different aspects of this, but this is very much a group initiative where we have more than 10 group functions involved in either doing the development of the ongoing development projects or the deployment of the finalized projects. So this is the main ambition actually for us, is to kickstart and really get the digital transformation in our operation function going. And that cannot happen by 10 or 40 or 100 people in one end of the organization. It has to be something that is lived every day across the entire organization. Which also means that our function, what we do, is temporary, because at one point this should shut down and be something that is lived in the normal organization. I've also just put some numbers on here. We have actually been so fortunate for a long period of time to not have a certain set of KPIs that we need to deliver upon every year, but more the target to go and learn and then do the activities that is right in terms of where we're heading towards in the programs. But we now start to see evidence of impact coming out of this, both on cost, but also on lead times, on our equipment efficiency, reduction of micro stops, higher employee motivation and lower stress in our plants, traceability in our products, and better forecast accuracy on our sales plans. So this is just some of the impact that has come out of some of these 40 activities that are now finalized. And as I said, we don't have time, and I don't think it is of interest to go through 90 different projects or 40 different projects. So this is just a taste of what we've been doing, from additive manufacturing, putting that on the shop floor with small printers that we use in our maintenance department. They are actually what have saved us 18,000 days in terms of lead time for components, and more of them have a payback time in weeks. Dashboards to show our equipment efficiency, connecting our equipment, virtual reality, and on systems for using smartwatches on the shop floor, and so on. So what I will do now is to pick 2 of these and just deep dive into that to give you a bit of a flavor on how we work with it, but also I think hopefully as an inspiration to 2 good projects. And the one is virtual reality training, and the other one is the digital board meetings. So if we look at virtual reality training, then this was actually one of the very first projects that we started out in the Factory of the Future program, because at that time, well, we thought there must be something here, right? We must be able to utilize virtual reality to create a more engaging and fun training experience while still making it possible to get good learning, and also creating a setup where we can have on-demand learning on a shop floor, which is not the case today. A setup where we could have 0 time wasted going from A to B, and most importantly, standardizing our knowledge. Because today, of course, we have standard operating procedures and training manuals and so on, but whether it is me or Jesper, for example, who would do the introduction to that or the training, we would most likely present it in different ways and also perhaps focus on different aspects. Here it is always the same kind of training bit. And then moving the training away from the line or the equipment, we could also avoid downtime due to mistakes made in the training, lower quality or scrap due to that during the training. So this was the ambition, that's what we wanted to do. What we then did, and the way we work, as I said, we do a pilot, we do a proof of concept, and we do that, if possible, on the shop floor in our pilot plants, because we want to not only get their feedback, but also make them acquainted to all of these new technologies. So this is, as you could see, a very simple setup that doesn't really look nice, but that was what we were able to do, and it served the purpose perfectly. So here we have a few sensors that we can use for the VR setup. That is what we chose. And then we did a proof of concept. We did that together with many different people. Actually, the first one that volunteered for this was a guy that was 60 some years old, and that immediately crushed the assumption that digital stuff is just for young people, because he was fully engaged and really wanted to step into this and utilize this tool. We did a test, because one of the key aspects was, is this as fast or faster in terms of a learning experience? We had the assumption that it would be faster. So we designed a test where we had made a training application for real life training that was on the shop floor in our pilot plant in Denmark. And then we took a new guy that was a completely new apprentice in Grundfos, not in any way accustomed to Grundfos factories or way of doing production. And then we put him into the training zone. He trained Monday, he trained Tuesday, and then Wednesday, sometime during noon, he was completely full in his mind of all of this training. Imagine just going through the same training that takes 10 minutes over and over and over again, with breaks in between, of course, but still. He didn't train Thursday, and then Friday, which was the time for the exam, then in the morning he just went through it a few times, and then he went down to the real life cell where we assembled these big sheet metal forming tools that weigh 800 kilograms each. And then the experienced operator was standing there with pen and paper ready to take notes on how well he was doing. And he just went through the assembly and disassembly without any problems. And he was told he could come back anytime to work at that station because he did the job perfect. That took 1 week of training, and normally that training takes 6 weeks. So a massive reduction in training time, which was actually quite surprising for us that it was so big and possible to go to that extent. So that really changed the mindset of the possibilities of this in the organization and gave it the push it needed, because of course it is more radical compared to a normal peer-to-peer training situation. So what we did from there was to make a concept that could then be deployed globally with this training cell that you can see in the lower right corner, which would be our standard training cell that we could put on the shop floor in our plants to ensure that now it was possible to go to that training when they needed it and have this standard concept that was the same in all the plants. Then we started the rollout, as we do when we finalized the pilot project. We then start the rollout, and here are some pictures from the inauguration of this training cell in our Chinese plant. You can actually also see on the picture on the right side, you can see one of the other small projects we did at that time, which is a project on telepresence robot, utilizing them on the shop floor to be more present on the shop floor for people sitting remotely, used by Marcus, who was one of the team members in the team, and his daughter that is looking as Janet takes the training for the first time. So we deployed this to our plant in Denmark, our plant in China, in Serbia, and then we also have 2 training cells in Hungary. So that was just perfect. It was a perfect beginning of the deployment of this. We made in the very beginning then also some training applications that you can see here for specific trainings in these plants that was of high interest of starting utilizing VR training on to gain these benefits that comes out of this. We also made training that had more generic application. So for example, knowledge about deep draw, so sheet metal forming, what actually happens in the tool. One thing is that you can operate the machine, but what actually happens in, and why is it important to look for these and these features when the part comes out of the tool, for example. Another one is training that everyone goes through when they start in a plant in Grundfos, basic safety and quality and risk aware training that we developed 2 applications for those. So let me then take you through a few learnings, because we had massive learning. As I said, this was one of the first projects. It was also the second project that was ready for deployment. So we had a huge amount of learning on this project. Because as I said, it started out excellently in 17, making the proof of concept, finalizing that in the beginning of 18, and then doing these 5 stations or training cells globally. Then the ambition was then in 19, we would see a surge of more content and more users. And that didn't happen. It didn't happen. And we were scratching our heads why, and I'll come back to the answer. And then of course in the beginning of 2020 something happened, COVID happened, which made it impossible for us to do VR training with the setup that we had, which was because as a precautionary measure in our plants, they are split into zones and you are only allowed to move in one zone in the plant, which meant that the VR training cell was now restricted to one zone in the plant, only available for the people in that zone, which defeated the purpose of the entire thing. So that was really difficult for us. Another thing that was now painfully clear was it is still too expensive to develop these solutions, these applications for VR training. We need local vendors that is close to the plants, that can go and visit the plants and understand the training application, but also have a lower cost base to do these developments. So that has actually been what we have focused on then in 2020, because this is prohibiting us to doing the deployment. So what we have then done is, you can see the small VR headset in the top right corner. That is now going to be our future standard setup for this. Going away from what was the HTC Vive, which requires sensors that are mounted and you have to stay within these sensors area. Now being a fully autonomous headset that you can just use wherever you want to. So this will be what we call our modular mobile VR setup. That is then also close to 100th of the price of what it costs to implement both the VR but also the training on the shop floor. We have also started then onboarding local vendors, for example in China, which cuts off 50% of the development cost for training applications compared to what we had before with the vendor we were using. So these are important steps for us to take the next step now onwards, because I have to say this is one of the cases where the deployment is standing still and we're not seeing this surge still, but that I am fully confident that it will come with these changes that we're now making. So what have we learned apart from what I've already shared? One thing is mapping impact from a situation or a tool like this is really difficult. Of course, we can map the impact of the training time reduced, but linking that to, for example, maintenance cost when we move it away from the line, more uptime, stuff like that, and also the better training experience, that is super difficult because that is not something that we're really measuring today. And we're still struggling in that, but we're trying to set up measurement points to also convince the plants that there's really something to gain. Then if we look at the way we started, we should have started with the other way around. We should have made more applications available for more users before we started out rolling out the hardware. That is natural now, but I think here we were simply so engaged and so enthusiastic of getting this out in the plants that it was something that just took us, and then we basically forgot this. So if you go on the same journey, start the other way around. When that is said, the user experience and the feedback we get is really good, and it's something that they really value to do. So, and we also start now seeing the savings on time and maintenance cost. And as I said, I'm confident that we will see this surge of users with the new hardware setup, and also when we get the cost of the applications down. But it's important to remember that VR will never substitute fully what we do today as peer-to-peer training. It will have to be an on top of or together with setup where we can do both. So a super good project where we really learned a lot on both the technology, how to do the rollout. And then that brings me to the next one, which is a project that we then did sometime after, and where we also, in terms of this for the rollout, we could take in some of the learnings from the VR training experience. And then a key difference is the VR stuff, that is a pull program or project. This is a push project that we're going to now. And what we wanted to do here was simply to digitalize what we do as daily action meetings on the shop floor today. I don't know how accustomed you are to going around on shop floor using lean management, but there's a few pictures in the middle and the left, which are KPI boards that is hanging in all plants, and KPI boards, totems, that is in each production group, which has the KPIs used to follow up both on where we are on a daily, weekly and monthly basis, but also the containment actions and improving actions to mitigate any decline in the KPIs. And this we wanted to digitalize. And we wanted to do that because we wanted to have real-time data, but we also wanted to take away the manual process of doing this update, because we spent a lot of time doing that. And similar to the VR training, we wanted to be able better today to enforce a global standard. That is not something that the plants can deviate from. An interesting thing here, and I just want to pause for a few seconds here to talk about the power of the pen, because in a lean world, the power of the pen is super crucial. And the thinking is that it means something that you take your pen and you go out to the board and you write the KPI and you mark it red or green. That has an influence on how your ownership is towards this KPI. So for this pilot here, we were struggling with that perception in our own organization as well, because that makes it impossible for us to digitalize this. So what we did was we actually did a fast pilot, and we just left that on the shop floor for a year. And what happened was, within that year, they changed from using the paper-based board to simply only using the digital board, because they didn't feel any difference. And that convinced also our lean guys that this was the way to go forward. So we extended the project period from what we normally would do, because 1 year is a completely ridiculous amount of time to do this. But we needed to do that also to work with the perception. But from there it was fast. We made a concept where we have all the data in the cloud, making it possible for us to push them to the different reports or applications where they're needed. And what we have then made is a digital solution where we're able to have similar boards on a plant, autonomous production unit level, and also on the production group on the totem level. We also have a digital system to do the escalation of the actions that has to be done. And we have a manual input for selected KPIs, because it is super important when you do stuff like this that you do not necessarily go for 100% regardless of the effort it requires. So we decided here to say there are some of the KPIs that we will not automate going directly to this, that we will still have to do manually, but we want to take away the paper. So we'll still do it digitally, but we don't want to waste the time getting these on to gain the benefits from getting 80% of the KPIs done automatically. Same with the manning board. That was another part of our daily action meetings that we took away, or we want to take away and make digitally. But we didn't do that here again, because we wanted to get this out as fast as possible, and then we can save the manning where they manage each staff with the right people and competences. We can do that in a different project. So what we have now is one standard system that we can deploy globally, which of course makes it difficult to tailor it for specific needs in the plants, but that I'm okay with that. And of course there's a high initial investment on this, but you also get again the lower running cost and the more easy to maintain going forward. So that is now deployed to 15 sites, our 15 biggest sites, and then other plants can then pull it if they want to. Within 1.5 years, our CI organization were able to do that, and you can see a few pictures on the right, live from the plants. From a lower right corner is a plant level, and then you have a production group with a very happy guy from Russia that is celebrating that now they are up and running. So the impact coming from this is, of course, as I said, more real-time data, easy to access this from anywhere and anytime. And actually, this is the main reason that we have been able to do daily action meetings still during the COVID lockdown, where plant managers and a lot of the management team were having to sit from home, but we could still do it because now the data was available in a different format. And then we remove a lot of manual, non-value adding work. Actually, we save 10 million Danish kroner yearly by implementing the system, which means that this has a payback time in less than a year for us. So a completely different setup and business case compared to the VR training, which was a more long-term, radical thinking than this is. And then, of course, there's a lot of other benefits coming from this. So key learnings. Ensure when you do something like this to kill parallel systems. It's always easier to go back to do what you did before, but ensure to kill parallel systems. And then I'll only mention one more here. Ensure to have enough time to do the implementation. We set aside 5 days for the implementation in a plant, but then in 5 days they're also up and running. And they normally takes the first 3 days before they really catch on and see the light, because it's a different way of working, it's a different way of thinking about this. So it's important to ensure that you have time to onboard and get the change management process done in a good way when you give them a good new tool. So let me just wrap up with saying what is next for us then within this. So as you could see from some of the projects shown here, that our time has a lot been spent within the digital factory part. So what we will also do now is extend it more outwards into supply chain and distribution and service on how we can do this in a better way, supporting it with digitalization, so more having a value chain perspective. I haven't talked much about additive manufacturing, but that is a really key focus area for us as well, moving that into a state where we can utilize it for production. And that is going to be something, as I said, that can really disrupt. Think about distributed manufacturing, where I don't have to have a big plant that can do it, but I can distribute it into local print shops that can print our components for us if they are certified to do that. So a lot of opportunities there, also for completely radically different designs that can improve both performance, quality, and customer experience out of these components. MES is a key project for us going forward, and that links to the last thing I will mention, is data. I haven't talked a lot about the digital board meeting uses data, but data from our equipment and utilizing advanced algorithms to work with that and getting to a state to doing predictive or prescriptive maintenance, for example. That is the next big step for us. We are just now getting to a state where we can have the right platform in our foundational projects to connect our equipment and get the data. And I think in this, you have to be really humble in terms of getting the foundations right. Get the data, visualize the data, start with that, and then build from there. We have tried to go for the higher ambition level from the beginning, and that didn't work for us. We have to take the step back and ensure we have the foundation right before we take the bigger steps and making it more advanced.
How we are going to ensure this talent and upskilling people so they're really ready for innovation and using all of these things that we've been talking about. But first, I promised Eric, and it's related to your employees. So Eric had a question. Any tips on how to make existing employees think outside of the box rather than hiring in new talent for innovation? And if I can just ask in the order of our speaker, how we did it today. So Thomas, can you share any tips on this? And I'm gonna ask Christopher and Ulrich afterwards as well.
Thank you. First of all, an excellent question. I think this is something a lot of us are thinking about, and in the way in which I would approach this, and we think about this at the other universities, that we really all do have the capability for being creative. And it's really, I think Christopher had an excellent set of tools and approaches, and Ulrich was talking about how to do it in practice. But I think it really is about building the culture and encouraging people to use their creativity. I think in many of our current organizations, we don't do that. And people are sort of, and I'm exaggerating, of course, but sort of encouraged to come in and check their brains in the where you leave your codes when they come to work. And we need to change that. And we need to bring the creativity to the workplace as well. So I'm a big fan of the thinking that we all have capabilities for creativity, and it's our jobs as leaders to bring them out.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. And you were talking about different ways of doing that, right? In your presentation. So I assume that's part of your recommendation as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. Build the culture. I'm a big believer in building the culture of creativity, and that enables the people who are already there to flourish in creativity.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Thomas. Chris, what's your comment on this? How to make existing employees think outside of the box?
Yeah, thanks Jesper, and thanks Eric for the good question. I completely agree with what Thomas said. I think in essence you can say that there are kind of different levels of value creation, right? There's a strategy which typically sits with the C-suite and the board perhaps, right? So what is it we need to do different there? Sometimes some of the CEOs that I'm working with are quite frustrated with their C-suite or with their board, right? In terms of lacking this type of entrepreneurial, curious questions, experiments, driving kind of breakthrough or game changers. So that's one level of getting people to think different, and that's a different group to work with perhaps than, let's say, fresh grads who's just coming into the company, or kind of people who's servicing customers, or maybe working in the factory, as Ulrik was sharing, right? It depends really who you're working with and what does different mean. I think then the next question is then, are there certain ways that we can, working with maybe the CEO and the C-suite, can align on what's our current culture? Do we even know what's our culture right now? And what is the culture we need? So I was just on a call with a client earlier today who had done these type of surveys and interviews and stuff like that. So they had some data already, but they had mainly been looking at it from an employee-centric standpoint. What kind of culture our employees want to have, as opposed to what kind of culture do we need from a strategy standpoint? What's the future of the industry that we're in, or the industries we want to be in? So I think the future culture has to be a mix of where's the company going, where's the customers going, and what would the type of talent that we need and that we have want, right? So that it's an employee and customer-centric culture, and finding that sweet spot. And then I think there's in essence a question of skills building as well, right? And practicing those skills and getting to mastery, where design thinking and agile are two key, lean are 2 or 3 key approaches, I would say, to this. I think you cannot really institutionalize these skills unless they're practiced by the leadership. So I think there is a leader and middle management question there. So I don't think there's kind of one switch that you can just flip that switch and then you'll be a creative, innovative, awesome company. Sadly, it's not that easy. So I think it needs to actually be kind of a mix of strategy, communication, leadership, innovation focus, mixed with culture work, often with HR as a key partner. Skills building, and also I think hiring in new types of talent that maybe wasn't in your industry before. So many of the clients we've been working with that have done a good job at this, not all, but those who've done a good job at it have often challenged who should work for them and what kind of people do we need. What would it look like if we had people from completely different industries coming at these questions? Would they solve it different than someone who's been in the industry for a long time?
Thank you, Chris. That was great perspectives on this. Ulrik, do you have some extra perspectives on it?
Yeah, I agree to what has been said, right? I think my perspective is you get what you measure, right? And you get what you spend your time on and what you talk about as a leader and as a manager. So to me at least, it has been super important to ensure that the people that, for example, in my team are working on getting new ideas, because that is part of their job, that they know that is part of their job, right? Because otherwise, if you only talk about delivering what I just presented on projects and rollouts, and that becomes 100% of where they spend their time. And they need to focus on allocating time and knowing it is okay for me to be unproductive today on this project, because now I'm getting new inspiration. And then I think it's also a lot about creating a risk-free environment to some extent, because going into thinking out of the box requires courage, right? And it needs to be okay that when you think outside of the box and you come with a completely stupid idea, that idea is okay, even though it's stupid, and that is part of the culture that you want to nourish and develop. Right?
This was 3 very good perspectives from our panelists, I think. Eric, if you have a follow-up question, feel free to ask it. We're going to move on to another question in the meantime. So, little bit related, so hiring in new talents to do your innovation and move you forward. If you should say 1 or 2 things that you would focus on, or you would advise companies or HR functions to focus on in terms of getting these right creative people who understand talking with the customers, understand what the customers need, and are able to, challenge things and make mistakes. What if we were talking about maybe 1 or 2 characteristics, what would that be? Maybe we take the same order again. Thomas, sorry for that.
Thank you. It's always with my surname and the name of my school, Arts, where I always get to be the first in alphabet. So I'm used to it. I think courage to really do things, and I loved what Ulrich was talking about, act your way to new thinking. And I think courage, in a way, is one of the key things that you would be looking at, so that people really have the trust in themselves and their thinking to put it out there and take the risks. So probably that as first. And then I really enjoy this. It's not something that I even invented. When you're hiring, look for intelligence, energy, and integrity, and make sure that you have the integrity, because if you only have intelligence and energy, you are in trouble. But you really need to have the integrity, so the trust as well, because building culture of trust and having a high trust organization and team culture is really key in having the courage, so that you have the courage to fail when you can trust the people around you. So around these sort of attributes I would look at. Well, just to add one thing, one of the quotes I really love is, when leading creative organizations and building a creative team, you hire hard, then you manage soft, but if it doesn't work, then you fire hard too. So you really make sure that you get the right people on board, and then you give them a lot of autonomy and space. But if it doesn't work, then it's your job to intervene.
Thank you for sharing, Thomas. That was some nice thing, and the hire hard and then soft and hard. That sounds like a great advice that I think some leaders, at least, they are maybe challenged on. But yeah, Chris, do you mind to share your perspectives on it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to dish out advice, generic advice, because it depends. The consultants' getaway answers always, it depends, right? But it really does, because it really depends what industry you're in, what's the makeup of your current talent. Again, back to strategy and where the future lies, right? What type of skills, what type of solutions are you looking for, versus what have you got? And I think what we're seeing in a lot of the large organizations that we're working with, for example, in finance, insurance, banking, and oil and gas and so on, is there is actually a lot of great creative talent. It's not that you don't have creative people, it's that you don't have a creative way of working, and that you're not tapping the current potential. No doubt that you could attract more, and there are some industries that probably has a lower creativity score, if you like, or lower digital score, whatever you want to call it, lower entrepreneurial score than others. So I think it's both, how can you unlock and leverage the talent you already have in your organization, and what did you do last year or last week or last quarter that didn't unlock those opportunities? What was it that the CEO said he shouldn't have said? What was it that the CFO should have asked that he didn't ask? So I think a lot of it comes, culture kind of is the shadow of leadership, as a famous quote, right? So what is it we're doing that's killing our existing potential? I think in terms of hiring an employee brand, I think a lot of brands in traditional industries have a massive opportunity to tell a better story about themselves, but they need to back up that story back to we hire hard, right? We also sell hard when we're bringing in talent, but are we then delivering that employee experience internally? Is it as good as we said when we gave the offer, right? I think often there's some of these kind of more industrial ways of hiring that may need to change in some companies, right? I think in the startup world, there's certainly very different approaches where you could have maybe more softer, like project work is becoming more common also in larger companies, to kind of gig it out, farm it out. Could you have collaborative experiences created with employees before they become employees, to actually see how they perform for real when you give them a challenge? You said you're a problem solver, you're a fast learner, you're people-centric, but if we throw you into a Zoom room with a whiteboard and 5 other candidates to solve a problem, how do you actually behave, right? Or even if you're talking about internal hires, which most large companies prefer to do because it's cheaper and more effective, how do you know who you should move up in the organization, and what does up mean, right? Maybe we don't need more hierarchy. Maybe we need to widen our organizations instead of making them more hierarchical. But there is a question of how can we create opportunities for people to practice and demonstrate the behaviors that we're looking to inculcate and nurture. How can we actually create those experiences as part of our learning and development? But maybe more importantly, can we make learning development part of innovation? Because if you're just doing it for the sake of doing it in a classroom to do design thinking or agile or lean or whatever, but there's no stakes, you're not going to see the same behavior people are going to demonstrate out on the shop floor or in the branch of the bank or so on. So I think we have to make learning real, and I think we need to also think about that from a talent standpoint, that even if people don't get hired in that interview, what did they tell their friends and their network about the company?
It sounds like you're dealing with a number of HR functions and people and trying to help them to move to a next level, a different kind of level. Thank you for sharing your perspective, Chris. And Ulrik, what would your perspective? I mean, if there's a few things you would be looking for.
Yeah, just adding on top of what was already said, because to me at least, mindset is king. I would always focus on and put as the first priority that you have the right way of looking at things, the right way of approaching them, the right way of the courage, as Thomas talked about, on above the actual competences for a technical engineer, whatever it is that you go in with, because you can be the utmost and best specialist in the world, but going into a creative session, if you don't have that courage, if you don't have that flexibility of going into that and actually working together, collaborating in a team, it will never work. I actually, and we do give, as you said, Christopher, the problems, because that is, I think all of us have seen the interviews, right? Where I'm a perfect problem solver. I'm a team player. I can really do that. So that really shows the true nature of people, right? When they have to come back with a product or work together with a guy for a day to see how they collaborate. That is much better than a 5 1-hour interviews.
Sounds interesting. There's some real new insights for some of the HR people that might be on this call or looking at it later. I think at least here in the Philippines, in Asia in general, there's a high focus on technical skills and grades from universities. If we are to move a little bit, one more step back in the supply chain of talents as such, education-wise, setting the right environments. And now I'm not going to ask you first, Thomas, because that would be too easy and you would elaborate too much, as you are working for the leading university in Finland. But maybe Ulrik, what would you, if we were to give some advice to the educational sector on how to get more innovative people educated and more creative people, what would you think would be a good advice?
I don't know if it's an advice, but I can at least share my reflections from collaborating with a lot of different universities, right? I think there is a big difference between the environment in the universities compared to the environment in the industry, where in the university you have a ton of time but not a lot of money, but in the industry it's often the other way around, right? You have a lot of money but not a lot of time. So at least when I get newly graduated people into the organization, the first thing I have to help them is to speed up. Right? The clock speed and the frequency is simply higher in the industry and in the organizations, at least in the area that we're within. And I think that is something that we could focus a bit more on working with, and perhaps working in more agile way, having a higher clock speed when we do these collaborations. And then I think most importantly, ensure that they are to some extent exposed in collaborating in and with companies, and not just doing these semester projects or whatever they're doing at a university that is the same, where they can more or less leave their brain and just read the book, and then they can get a good grade, because that is not, grades are good, right, coming out of the university, but 1 or 2 years after, nobody looks at them anymore, right? They look at the person that sits in front of them. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing that perspective, Ulrik. And I assume the majority of your hires, are they are global, or are they based out of Nordic education system, where project work are more related to collaboration and?
They are. So in Grundfos, if you take Grundfos as a total, right, there's 4,000 employees in Denmark, and the rest is around the globe. So and in my team as well, it's in many different countries. So of course there is a difference, but I still look at the same thing. I try to find the same thing, because regardless if you're sitting in Denmark, Serbia, Hungary, China, or wherever you are, you have to collaborate. Right? We are out of the world where you're just collaborating with the 4 or 5 people that you're sitting together with. You are collaborating in a global space through teams or being on site, but you need to be able to step into it.
Thank you, thank you for sharing your perspectives. And I'll ask Chris to share his. You're muted, Chris. Okay, good.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think in my perspective, I think that the young talent, actually, at least from what we're seeing in our work in Southeast Asia, is the young talent overall is better equipped for the future than the old talent. They are innately more tuned into this way of thinking. There's still the challenge that they're coming out of a deeply broken education system in most places, where they have been in a way trained in the wrong thinking. Luckily, they have been spending a lot of their time on games and culture and social media and so on, because they have picked up the right mindset there. They have traveled at least before COVID, right? So I think that the foundation for creating the future is there, but I think, as always, it's old folks like myself who are getting in the way of creating the future, right? The last decade's innovators becomes the next decade's conservatives, in a sense, right? And I'm the one who invested in that plant, or I'm the one who installed that software or wrote that company policy, right? So therefore we shouldn't change it, right? Because we still haven't gotten the returns on that yet, right? We need to run it for another decade, right? So I think that creating space for change is a big part of the challenge here, and everyone is so zoomed out, are so busy maintaining the old, trying to maintain the old in an environment that has already changed so fast. I mean, it's almost like we're babies in this new world, right? Because no one has lived, we're all at the same page, because everyone has been living roughly 1.5 years in this new reality, right? And of course, there are some elements of the old reality that is still present, but there's probably more novelty than there is predictability, right? So I think that creating board meetings, senior leadership meetings, project meetings, and ways of hosting those processes that suits that environment is a bigger challenge. And then the second part I wanted to kind of jump on there was the question around reforming HR, or maybe breaking it down and changing it completely, right? Because I think HR, like many other functions, has to change, and has not changed fast enough before COVID. They have been under massive pressure during COVID to do things they have never learned or had to do before. And I think that there's a big need to kind of rethink how we think about employees. What if we thought of our employees as customers? What's our value proposition? What's our strategy for acquiring them? What's our strategy and value proposition for keeping them, growing them, and getting value from them, but also to them, right? And how, if you look at awesome companies, they have figured out these things, right? The leading global companies are very good at that, right? But many HR functions are still all about the processes and the scoring and the quarterly or annual review and and it's not meaningful, it's not relevant, and it's not driving performance.
Thank you, Christopher. Some nice recommendations from you as well. And Thomas, what would you say in terms of our newly those that are being educated with you and elsewhere at the top universities?
Yes, absolutely. I think we are facing a challenging new environment where we educate people, and I think the tension in a way is in the T-shaped learning. So we need to give the technical abilities Ulrich was talking about when we discussed hiring. So the graduates need to have some sort of deep technical understanding, but then they also need to have the sort of horizontal collaboration skills, experiences, new ways of doing things, etc., and finding the right balance, and then getting the universities to become agile enough to adapt to this kind of thinking. Because of course, when you talk to the faculties and different disciplines, they'd say that only thing that matters is the knowledge in our discipline to the students, and we want to do that. At the Aalto University, maybe you have heard of the Slush, the startup sort of fair that we have in Finland, where venture capitalists fly from US West Coast as well, and that actually was created by us giving space and trusting the students to do new things, and they started developing it, and we were sort of supporting, giving spaces, giving a little bit of resources, and the whole Slush movement grew out of that, and that started at Aalto University. We are quite proud of that, and we hope to do similar things. So as Christopher was saying, we are the innovators of the last generation. Now we need to get out of the way and let the young people find the suitable way of doing things. And that's what we are trying to facilitate, partly with this radical creativity with our students here at Aalto University.
Thank you for sharing. See a lot of nodding also this time among our other speakers. I think we are very much aligned. I think there's a lot of good advice here.
Absolutely, we should have had someone who's completely thinking the opposite of us, because I think we share quite a lot of the same sort of cultural values about creativity and innovation.
But it's still nice to get those perspectives in, right? So yeah, we could have had somebody with a different point of view, but I think it works. Christopher, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I promise to keep it short. I recently learned about this company called Hinder. I'll put it in the chat afterwards. H-A-I-E-R, if you don't know them. They have a very interesting approach. So they're basically in kind of they do appliances, kitchen appliances and stuff like that. And I think it was about, I'm not sure I get the details right, but I think about 10 years ago, GE Global Appliances approached them in China and wanted to buy them. And they said, no, thank you. And then GE said, well, we're coming for you. We're going to destroy you. We're a big global. You're just a small Chinese company, at least compared to us. And now actually Hinder has bought over GE Appliances and also Sanyo. I think the appliance is part of Sanyo. But the way they have done it is what's interesting, because what we're seeing is that every company is trying to bring in agile and design thinking and these type of practices into their current structure, right? A pyramid with the top being the smartest and all that. But what they have done is quite radical. So they have broken down the entire business into micro enterprises of maximum 10 people that hold all of the corporate functions in that micro enterprise. So they would have strategy, budget, hiring, innovation, products, customer service, everything is there. And then they create collaborative contracts with other micro enterprises. So it's completely challenging the traditional business school kind of approach to how organizations are supposed to be designed and built for scale. So it's more of a network model, and there are other folks working on these questions, obviously, in terms of holacracy and so on. So I think new organizational models may also be a place to look, not just bringing in the right talent, giving them the right training, making the culture as good as it can be in a hierarchical structure. If you want entrepreneurial behavior, then make people entrepreneurs. So that's obviously more radical, but they have been growing 20% year on year for, I think it's 9 years in a row. Quite impressive.
Thanks for sharing this perspective, Chris. Ulrich or Thomas, do you want to add a comment to it or a perspective to it? then feel free to do so.
Yeah, I think what Christopher is saying is absolutely right, that we need to challenge. And this was sort of what I was trying to imply in the early part of my presentation, that we built the understanding of organizations from the industrial era. And now we need to rethink our assumptions about organizations as well. And I think there are some of these openings like teal organizations and holacracies, etc., that are trying to sort of find the new paradigm for the future. But we haven't gotten there yet. We are in the shift. So we sort of have the hierarchical organizations, and we talk about creativity in employees. We talk about creativity in the culture. But we haven't, in many places, taken the plunge yet to completely reorganize things. And I think that is the next step that we need to start thinking about and finding the new ways. And there are beautiful examples of that in different places.
Thank you, Thomas.
I fully agree, and I think it also goes to the motivation of the people employed right now. Christopher, you talked about the newly graduated being more equipped for this way of working, and I completely agree. And I think they also come with a different set of expectations to the company, right? And a different set of expectations in terms of how to be managed, the level of autonomy, the level of freedom that they're given to operate, right? And that doesn't necessarily function well within a strict, normal, hierarchical organization. So I think also to accommodate that, there is a need to be more flexible. And I think right now we're just seeing one of the aspects, which is not really related to the organization, but the working from home, which if I look at our company was completely unheard of to some extent if you just go a year back right now. But now this is a request, and we have people saying that, so if we're not able to do this, then I guess somebody else will be able to give me the freedom to work remotely. And I think that is just the first step. We'll see that in many other places, to both attract new talent, but also retaining them in the company.
Certainly, Ulrik, and I think it's even more applicable here in Manila, with one of the worst traffic in the world. I hear many of our members, they are mentioning, you cannot just force me back to go to work. I'm not interested. Right? I want to work from home. I want different kind of flexibilities. So having to think innovative and creative in all of the organization are needed to survive and get the right talents on board moving forward. Thanks for sharing these perspectives. I want one more final question related to the same thing. So just taking half a step back and talking about those people that we have on board. And in terms of upskilling them, and Ulrik has been doing training with virtual reality and different kind of ways. Do you see? I mean, what do you see as moving forward? How do we get the existing workforce really upgraded properly? Any comments on that? How do we get them to be innovative and upgraded? Chris, can you answer first?
Sorry, I thought it was for Ulrik. I think to some extent, I think it's not just about the perfect learning program. I think it needs to be seen in context of the overall organization and what role does learning play. If we say upgraded, it's not like we're gonna give them X% new knowledge, right? So what are the experiences that we can create for our employees that will make them more able to be relevant tomorrow and to create the day after tomorrow, right? So back to some of the pointers from Thomas in his presentation around creating agency, making people feel responsible, but also able to affect their own environment and the results that they're driving, I think is key. Sometimes we hear clients say that, well, that might work nicely in the US or in Europe, but we're in Asia and the education system and the culture and my organization is different. And I think, frankly, that's a cop out. I don't think that's knowing reality here, because talent is very global already, largely speaking. And I think everybody wants some level of autonomy, some level of accountability, some level of growth and learning. And I think there are maybe some habits that needs to be broken when people have been raised a certain way, when they have been educated a certain way, where they're used to being told what to do. Especially if we're talking people that are maybe less educated or less well educated, have, for example, here in Malaysia, maybe gone through public universities that are not always up to the mark. But I think overall, most people enjoy and benefit from being in an environment where they can influence their own environment, where they can make decisions, where their views can be put across. So I think a lot of this goes back to ownership in the board and ownership at the C-level first. And then you can ask the questions around, so what do we need? What questions do we need to answer from HR? What questions do we need to answer from operations? What questions do we need to answer from marketing, IT, product, blah, 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 right? So I think for me, if we don't make this a strategic, intentional initiative, then it would always be kind of slapping a plaster on the wound, not really thinking about well-being, right? If I can use that metaphor, right? It's not about fixing a problem. It's about redefining who we want to become and then practicing that every day, every week together.
Nice. Thank you, Christopher. And Ulrik, can you share a little bit on that?
Yeah, fully agree. I think I'll just take out an example from what we've been doing in this Factory of the Future program, because when we initially started out, we thought that we were going to develop, a certain training program that we will roll out everywhere to everybody, and during the course of that, it became clear to us, of course, if people need to utilize new tools, and if they expect some sort of an introduction to that, but most of that they probably take self-learning, right? Because tools are being introduced so fast, and that's actually why what we ended up having was more a change management or coping with the higher clock speed of change that they are now seeing in the organization. And now this was from a digital point of view, so all the digital tools. But I think it applies regardless, because that was actually the main point that they wanted inspiration on. And now we were in a plant setting, but us that are on a management level, I think we are used to being thrown at whatever courses on being capable of doing change management and knowing that, but they are not necessarily. So that was actually a key need. And again, I think it actually took away one of the assumptions that I had that they didn't want it or they weren't ready for it, because they are. We use this, and we are so exposed to this in our daily lives that taking it into the workplace is just the next natural step. But they just need to be aware of how this fits into the bigger scheme of things and how to really work with it at the workplace as well. So I think making that possible and exposing them, all employees, to that is what will make them capable of operating in that. And then, of course, in the specific areas, they need to have the competences that they need to have to perform. But the mindset of it, I think that is what we should really work with.
Thank you, Ulrik. And Thomas, not to preempt your answer, but I know you were talking in your presentation about a stage setter. So I don't know if you're going to talk about that now, but it would be interesting. Go ahead and share your point of view on it.
Absolutely, and coming from the arts background, I really want to use a quote from one of the videos that I often use in my trainings, where when a very famous composer, Herbert von Karajan, is asked why he conducts the way he does, he says that, yes, the worst damage I can do to my orchestra is to give them clear instructions. And I think that is brilliant, because if you don't give too explicit, clear instructions, it forces people to think for themselves, find for the solutions, and really look to each other and see, okay, how do we do this now? And that creates the sort of common creative environment. So maybe that's one way of setting the stage, that you don't give the answers, but you let the people to figure out some things on their own. Of course, you need to agree on the big picture and the direction and enabling the vision, common vision first, but that's how I would approach it.
Nice, Thomas. And I think you interpreted maybe what Chris he was just sharing. So he was just, to those of you who don't look at the chat, but he was saying I'm hearing the adult learning model of 10% formal learning, 20% coaching, and 70% application and reflection. So that I think that sums it up somehow. What all of you have been sharing on it. So let's we are coming to an end. The time is basically up. I would like to just have, if you can have one final message, each of you, to our audience, something that they should start doing, or what would you encourage them to, in terms of being more innovative, more creative, more customer-centric, more open-minded, flexible? And can I start with Thomas, please?
Sure. I think the key here is that be bold in thinking in new ways. Those companies, as we heard from the higher experience, are the winners who really think differently in this situation, who are the first. If you remember my pictures from horse carriage to the first cars and then to Teslas, the quicker you move from the horse carriage to Tesla, the better you will be equipped. So be bold and take the steps. We are in the time of change, so embrace that and be the leader rather than follower.
Thank you, Thomas. Nice parting words with us here. Ulrik, are you okay to be next?
Sure. I think I will more or less say the same, but with different words, right? Because I'll just go back to my quote that you need to start acting, and then thinking along the way. You don't get a lot of learnings by creating 100-page PowerPoint. So that would definitely be my advice.
Thank you so much, Ulrik. Very nice. And Chris?
Yeah, I mean, always hard to come last here. I would say probably something in around, how can I say, making it personal. I mean, find something that you actually care about, because then action is also easier to pull off, right? The world wants so much from us. So it's also figuring out about yourself in terms of, you've been through these presentations today, tomorrow you have an awesome virtual tour and so on. What was the question that you had in your head that made you sign up for this experience? What are the small things you can start doing already tomorrow or the day after that you can begin experimenting with? Where can you find people to talk to who maybe care about this? Maybe there are people in Philippines or wherever you're located that also care about these, or maybe you don't need to be located with them. You can just jump on a Zoom call with them, reach out to people who's already good at the things you want to learn, figure out what, and even maybe in different industries or in other spaces than the one you're working in. So I, for example, as a concrete example, I have like regular calls with about 7 different people that I speak with every month around the world that I respect and love, and that's doing kind of, what can you say, breakthrough work in their spaces. Very different from mine, but we learn so much from each other. So it's kind of arranging a peer coaching kind of an environment. So that could be a simple thing. You don't have to find any budget. You don't need to get HR approval. You don't need to do anything, right? And then if you can maybe do the same thing with some people inside your company, maybe get mentored by some of the seniors if you're a junior. Maybe if you're a senior, start learning from the juniors. Maybe they know things you don't. So I think you don't necessarily need formal learning. You can just write down on a beer mat or a post-it note some questions you're sitting with, and then quickly, what's one Google search I could do? What's one LinkedIn outreach I could do? So to make it a bit more tangible for yourself. So action and big ambition together.
Taking actions and taking initiative. That's some great final words from our fantastic panel. Thank you to the 3 of you for volunteering your time for this and helping us inspire the Philippines and all of our participants and those who will review this at a later point of time. I really appreciate it. Lots of great insights, lots of new inspiration for all of us. Thank you so much for doing this with us.